The evening of December 28, 1978, should have been a quiet bridge between Christmas and the New Year. In Oxford, Ohio, the college crowds had thinned for the holidays, leaving the brick-paved streets blanketed in a hushed winter stillness. But inside a modest campus apartment, that silence was about to be shattered. By the time the police arrived, the festive spirit of the season had vanished, replaced by a scene of staggering violence that no one in this sleepy town was prepared for. This wasn't just a random act in a campus town. It was a case defined by a controversial confession and a trail of botched leads that still leaves a shadow of doubt over the town today. This is the story of Elizabeth Andes. Hello friends, my name is Marcia, and this is Midwest Murders, where we explore the unsolved cases that still haunt America. Oxford isn't just a town, it's a quintessential academic sanctuary, the Yale of the West, where the architecture is red brick and the ivy grows thick. In 1978, Oxford felt insulated from the chaos of the outside world. It was a community built on trust, where the biggest worries were midterm exams or a Saturday football game. But this was also the era of the stranger danger transition. America was just beginning to realize that the most dangerous person in the room might be the one you least expect. Elizabeth Andes, age 23, was the picture of this era's optimism. A recent Miami University graduate with a degree in home economics, she was described as super nice and extra quiet, but with a strong, mature personality. She was just days away from moving to Cincinnati to start a new career at Shillitoe's department store. She was the daughter of Charles and Shirley Andes of Rocky River, a Cleveland suburb. She had an older sister, Leslie, and two younger siblings, Caroline and Charles. She lived in the Candlewood Terrace apartments at 517 Wells Mill Drive and shared an apartment with her boyfriend, Robert Young, and another friend, Susan Parmalee. All three had graduated just a week earlier and were preparing to go their separate ways. Thursday, December 28, 1978, wasn't a picturesque winter day that you would see on a Christmas card. Instead, Oxford was trapped in a cold, persistent drizzle, the kind of freezing mist that turns the red brick streets slick and treacherous. It was a miserable night that kept people behind closed doors, leaving the streets empty for anyone moving through the shadows. Elizabeth spent the day cleaning and packing. She had just returned to campus the day before after spending the holidays with her family in Rocky River. Since accepting the job at Shillitoe's, she was making plans to go to Cincinnati on Saturday to look for an apartment. At approximately 9:20 p.m., her boyfriend, Robert Young, arrived back on campus after spending the holidays with his family in Fairborn, a Dayton suburb. He brought with him some supplies so he and Elizabeth could finish cleaning the apartment before turning in the keys. With graduation over, he was planning to head west to seek employment as a geologist. When he entered the apartment, he was met with a nightmare. Elizabeth, nude and bloodied, lay dead on the bedroom floor. With no working phone in the apartment, Robert ran into the hallway, pounding on neighbors' doors in a desperate search for help. Most apartments were empty due to the holidays. He finally found someone home. At 9:32 p.m., a call was made from a stranger's living room that would forever change the trajectory of his life and leave a small town looking for answers in all the wrong places. The first officer on the scene found a room in complete disarray. The mattress had been pulled off the bed and a dresser had been toppled on top of Elizabeth. Investigators determined she had been strangled and stabbed 15 times. Her hands had been tied behind her back and her feet were bound. While police publicly stated at the time that Robert was not a suspect, that does not appear to have been the case. The Oxford police quickly locked onto him with tunnel vision. They never looked for another suspect. Despite his reputation as a quiet team player and former University of Miami football star, Robert was subjected to a grueling 15-hour interrogation that began just 30 minutes after he found Elizabeth. Under extreme duress, Robert confessed, a statement he immediately recanted once the interrogation ended. When the case went to trial in March 1979, the prosecution's case rested entirely on that confession. However, the physical evidence told a different story. A broken fingernail on Elizabeth's hand indicated that she had scratched her killer. Forensic experts testified that they found no blood on Robert and no scratches on his body. Friends described the couple as ideal and had never even heard them argue. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found Robert innocent. Police, believing that Robert was the killer, refused to consider another suspect and closed the case. In 1983, Elizabeth's family brought a civil action for wrongful death against Robert. In December of that year, he was cleared of any wrongdoing. The tragedy occurred at a time when Oxford was at its quietest. It was winter break, and the thousands of students who usually filled the sidewalks and the local hangouts had gone home to their families. The town was left to the locals and a few graduates who, like Elizabeth, were packing for the next chapter of their lives. For a community that had not experienced a homicide in more than 25 years, the crime felt deeply destabilizing. This wasn't a story about crime happening somewhere else, in a bigger city or a different world. It happened here, in a familiar apartment complex, to a young woman everyone described as kind, quiet, and responsible. In the weeks that followed, fear replaced routine. Doors were locked more carefully. Parents worried. Students returning for the spring semester came back to a campus that felt suddenly changed. Even without public discussion, the unspoken question lingered. If this could happen here, who was truly safe? Elizabeth's funeral was held at the Corrigan Funeral Home in Fairview Park. She was laid to rest in the Lakewood Park Cemetery. Her mother Shirley passed away in 2014 and her father Charles in 2017. As the years passed, the focus of this case began to shift. It was no longer only about what happened inside that apartment on December 28, 1978. It became about what happened afterward, and just as importantly, what didn't. Witnesses reported seeing 3 unfamiliar men in and around the apartment complex in the weeks leading up to the murder. These individuals were described as not belonging there, yet their presence was never actively pursued. Why were those sightings set aside so quickly? The investigation hinged on a confession obtained after 15 hours of interrogation, a confession later rejected by a jury and unsupported by the physical evidence. Once that path collapsed, the case itself stalled. No alternate suspect was identified and no renewed effort followed. Was this the result of limited resources, inexperience, or the overwhelming pressure to calm a frightened community with a clear answer? Or did the early focus on one suspect narrow the investigation so much that other possibilities were never fully explored? What remains most troubling is not just that Elizabeth's case went unsolved, but that certain questions were never allowed the space to be answered. For more than 40 years, those unanswered details have remained in the background, quietly reminding us that when an investigation stops short, the truth does not disappear, it simply waits. More than 40 years have passed since Elizabeth Andes was killed in her Oxford apartment. The town hasn't changed much. The university still hums with the dreams of young graduates, and the snow still crunches underfoot during those quiet winter breaks. But for those who remember, the air in this town carries a different kind of weight. Elizabeth was a young woman standing on the threshold of her entire life, with a new career waiting for her in Cincinnati and a family who expected her home. Her story deserved more than a rushed investigation and a narrow focus that allowed the truth to be sidelined. When a case remains unsolved, it isn't just a legal status. It's a wound that never quite heals for the family left behind. For Elizabeth's parents, the answers they sought never came before they passed away. Today, she remains a reminder that justice is more than a gavel coming down. It's the act of refusing to forget the person behind the file. Until the shadows of that December night are finally cleared, Elizabeth's story remains part of Ohio's unfinished history. If you have any thoughts or theories about this case, please leave them in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and may the truth reveal itself in the shadows.